What's up, everybody? Nick Whalen, Alex Barutha here with you. It's the Monday edition of the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball Pod. We have reached that point in the season, Alex. We've been saying it for weeks, but we continue to just be scraping lower and lower on the waiver wire. It's the final day of the season for the RotoWire Stake League, which if you're a loyal listener of the show, you probably heard us talk a little bit too much about throughout the year, but that is kind of our baseline 16-team league that we use when we talk waiver wire and kind of the league of record, I suppose, for you and I. But interesting setup with that league ending on a Monday because, there's still a waiver run last night. There's still 1 day's worth of games, but we don't play out the rest of the week. So I don't even know if it's really worth going into some of the waiver wire ads because, you're dropping top 10 players if they don't have a game today. Like I dropped Giannis to pick up Daquan Jeffries.
Yeah, maybe it could have ended on Friday or on Sunday,
Sunday,
but
yeah.
But I think the move, you have to maximize games played, especially if you're on the bubble,
Yep.
of this league, which finishing in the top half matters the most.
Yeah, you are definitely safe. I should be safe. My like ESPN analytics, like win projection, I think would be like 98%. But just to be safe, I had to empty the clip and basically get every position filled. Although I'm a forward short, like I can't even fill a full lineup because I ended up getting too many guards by accident via waivers. But we should be okay. I think I'd have to lose like 6 points tonight to our guy Ken Kreitz in order to fall out of that top half. So that at least will avoid us a pretty expensive steak dinner bill. In your other leagues, I know you're playing in a bunch of competitive leagues. How many of those are still going? How many of those are you chasing, a championship or a certain spot? Are you still grinding waivers for those leagues on a Sunday night?
Essentially, none of them are still going. Yeah, I gotta be honest. Most of those leagues are hosted by people within the fantasy industry, like fantasy analysts, and
Yeah.
so they're more prone than the average person to be like, March 15th, we're done.
Yep.
That kind of a thing.
Yep. I'm in a couple that go through game 82 and it's bleak out there. We should talk about the big injury news of the day. We'll hit some questions from the chat. We'll start looking ahead to next season. Players we're excited to target, guys you're going to be pushed up draft boards, and some guys we're staying away from. But not only did the Phoenix Suns lose by 39 points to the Houston Rockets last night, gave up 148. They were one of 3 teams on the slate to give up 140 plus. Milwaukee and San Antonio also did it. But in the process of losing by 39 points, they also lost Kevin Durant to an ankle injury. Just your classic, stepped on the defender's foot while going to the hole. Nothing nefarious there. But we did get the news earlier today that Durant will miss at least 1 week of action. Obviously, the Suns are trying to play their way back into the play-in, I think. This really could not come at a worse time. Not only does Phoenix still have the toughest remaining schedule in the NBA, but they play at Milwaukee on Tuesday. And with the way the Bucks are playing, that was a winnable game. Maybe it still is, but you take Durant out of the mix. That's brutal. At Boston on Friday, at the New York Knicks on Sunday. So we know for sure Durant's going to miss all 3 of those.
That's tough. And now the Mavericks are back, baby. AD's playing well. They're winning games. So yeah, like you said, this couldn't have come at a worse time for Phoenix.
Yeah, and the thing with the Suns is I don't know that there's an obvious pivot here. I don't know if Bradley Beal's coming back. Probably not. Doesn't seem like it at this point. It's like Grayson Allen can really only do so much. You're not going to ask Ryan Dunn to all of a sudden be like your second scoring option. It's a little like, what we talked about with Milwaukee last week with Dame going out, but at least there's Kevin Porter, like somebody who's like somewhat exciting off the bench. At least you could kind of hand some of that to Kyle Kuzma. But we're looking at the Suns who are already starting Colin Gillespie right now. They're already starting Ryan Dunn. It's like, who else is there? Is it a Cody Martin week? Is it a Royce O'Neal week?
If you're assuming that Beal is out, because I think the numbers, the on-off would say, okay, Bradley Beal is the guy who takes the big step up, and then, Booker does a little bit more, and Grayson Allen does a little bit more. But if you're also assuming Beal is out, in theory, Grayson Allen's taken on more responsibilities and other, when he was on the Bucks and sometimes on the Suns team, he would handle the ball a little bit more. But it's not like Tyus Jones has been that good, and you're not even starting him. So can you dust off Damian Lee and be like, now's your time, buddy? It's we've been waiting for you for 5 years.
Yeah.
Can we get this done?
Yeah, right now the Phoenix Suns are obviously out of the play-in mix, and it really feels like Sacramento is maybe the team that you're chasing now more than anyone. They've fallen behind the Dallas Mavericks. Kings are 36 and 38. Phoenix is 35 and 40. So 7 games left on the schedule for the Suns, 8 for the Kings. They do play each other, by the way, in game 82, which will be very interesting. That certainly could decide one of these play-in spots. The Bucks also play the Pistons the final 2 games of the season. So all hope is not lost necessarily to get a top 5 seed for the Milwaukee Bucks, but they've been sliding. I think you and I have been out on this Phoenix team for a while, Alex, but for most of the second half, I think we just assumed by default they would get into the play-in, really not even by their own doing. We're in a real danger zone here. I mean, it's now considered unlikely for that to happen, and the Durant injury only makes that worse. And I think the Suns are lucky in some ways that the 76ers exist, because that is clearly the biggest disaster team of the season. But Phoenix isn't far behind. And, I think you look ahead to next year, it's like, okay, what's the plan, right? How do you, there's not an obvious fix here. You're still going to have trouble getting off a Beal. Durant's got 1 year left on his deal. I think you probably explore trading him just like you did at the deadline. And as much as I love Devin Booker, man, I mean, he's not one of these, all right, just put 4 okay players around him and you're going to win 50 games type of guys.
He's not. And we saw that mostly earlier in his career. And then, that he got some more help and it was fine. They made it to the NBA finals. And, but yeah, I mean, especially with the way that the Suns organization has, well, they butted heads with Kevin Durant. And so you start to wonder, is the Durant trade on the horizon? Because it sounds like they explored that. But as presently constructed, they're not going to be a title contending team in the immediate future.
Is there a Durant trade partner out there who stands out to you? I think there will be multiple teams. There were reports at the deadline that Houston, Minnesota, obviously Golden State were in the mix, and I know at least one of those teams, Houston, confirmed publicly that it was the Suns who reached out to them. So I think they will continue to actively shop Durant. I think even at his age, there hasn't been too much of a statistical fall off. I think on the right night, Kevin Durant still looks like the most dangerous scorer in the NBA. We've seen a couple of those big games over these last few weeks, but I think there will be plenty of teams interested. You're looking at a 1-year deal. Presumably Durant will probably want to sign, what I would think would be like a 2+1 with whatever team trades for him, kind of similar to what Jimmy Butler was looking for. Obviously he's older, but like LeBron James in some ways, it still feels like we're a few years away from Durant entering his, Vince Carter end of career days where he's, he's out there, but he's playing 17 minutes, Dirk's farewell tour. I don't know when that's going to happen, but Durant is still an extremely effective player. So I think there will be interest.
Yeah, because I think if you're a fringe title contender or like a dark horse contender, you think, well, if we can get Durant, then we become a real contender. And if you were kind of in the middle of the pack, you might feel like you're a Kevin Durant away from being a dark horse contender. Like if you're the Orlando Magic, maybe that's not the right sort of, I don't know if that's like the right team to pick, but you're like, well, disappointing season. We have no offense. Yeah. What if we found a way to get Durant? That kind of a thing.
Yeah. I think what's hard for me with those teams, whether it's, and I think you're right, that's like the type of team to look for is like, all right, a team that's already established, because Kevin Durant doesn't want to go play for the Charlotte Hornets. It's like those teams are just like, he doesn't have a no trade, but that's not happening. I think like him being the piece that puts one of these kind of marginal contenders over the top is most interesting. But I think the problem is like those teams are not loaded enough. Like you still have to give something up to get Kevin Durant, even at this age, even on an expiring deal, it's like it's picks and it's probably a couple players. You got to match salary. So, Indiana, obviously Milwaukee's probably off the table. Atlanta, Orlando, all those teams are interesting. I think Houston is probably the one that makes the most sense just from we could put any kind of assets you want on the table perspective.
Yeah, I mean, if Phoenix was like, well, we want Jalen Green, you might be like, oh, I don't know. I guess sure. I mean, we basically fill in the same type of Jalen Green. What does he do for us? Well, when he's at his best, he's a really efficient scorer who can score 30 points when we need him to. That's Kevin Durant at the higher level, right? And like Atlanta has been one of my teams that I thought might do more at the deadline, or maybe they would when they lost Jalen Johnson for the year. I think that kind of put a nail in the coffin. But I don't think I would trade Jalen Johnson for Durant. So then it's like, are you going to do like Dyson Daniels and Okongwu and picks, and just roll with Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, and KD? It's like, that'd be a fun team. Risacher is there as well. But like, I really know what the upside of that team is, provided unless you get something big in free agency, like maybe you try to
Right.
sign Brook Lopez, which is not big, but it's
It's literally
something.
big. Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean, I think you're right. It's like you look at that team, you're like, all right, that's fun. Maybe you're the 5 seed in the East. It's like it's not like a markedly better team than what Durant was just on in Phoenix. And I think, look, at the level that Durant is playing, still extremely high, but I think we are, and we're there with LeBron too. Like we're past this guy alone drags you to a title contention. These guys,
Right.
as great as they're playing late in their careers, it's not what it was 10 years ago. And part of it too is the depth of the league. I think in 2012, if you had Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook and a few role players, Andre Robertson and Kendrick Perkins, yeah, you're going to win 58 games and you might go to the finals. But you just can't really get away with that anymore. I think Miami could be a spot. The Heat are
Yeah.
always aggressive. They're always in talks with these type of situations. But again, that's one of those teams where it's like, okay, what are you putting on the table? Is the Wiggins contract and Jaime Jaquez and Khalil Ware, like, does that get it done? Because I think if you're giving up Bam or Hero, those guys, Durant's a better player, but he's going to diminish, and he's not that much better at this point in his career that it really would move the needle for me.
Right. And then I wonder from Phoenix's perspective, like if they trade KD, would they also be like, well, we gotta trade Booker now because
I don't
what's the
know.
point? Like, are we gonna really run this thing back with Devin
Yeah.
Booker? Like, how many years can we realistically like soft rebuild around
Right.
Booker, who's 28? So then I wonder, well, do they even want players back, or would they just want picks
Right.
back? We can tank with Bradley Beal. The thing is, they don't even own their own picks,
Right.
so tanking doesn't do anything for them. That's sort of the tough part. But yeah, I mean, your point about Miami is exactly. I mean, Miami crossed my mind. I don't know if Detroit would do something. Um, they got Asar Thompson,
Right.
obviously, and Jaden Ivey. It's like, well, maybe if you're Phoenix and you want to reset,
Mhm.
those guys might be interesting.
Yeah. No, I think, I mean, there's been some smoke around Booker to Detroit. Being a Michigan
Yeah.
native, I think he's one of the few stars because of that connection who would be open to that, right? I mean, Kevin Durant's not like, hey, yeah, please, I have one destination, it's Detroit, Michigan, send me there. But like, Booker, I think would view that differently. To me, like all the reporting around this, Tim McMahon had a piece a couple weeks ago at ESPN that I was reading the other day that essentially implied that as far as what the Suns have said on the record, they would much rather trade Durant. They would still like to keep Devin Booker as an asset and rebuild around him. But I think that changes if Devin Booker goes to Matt Ishbia and says, "I see the writing on the wall here. I don't want to be the guy putting up 30 a game for a 32 win team for the next couple of years." So I think if Booker put pressure on them to trade him, we see this every year, right? Like we're like, well, he doesn't have a no trade clause. He's under contract. That doesn't matter. Like if the player goes to the front office and gets to the point where they're essentially trying to force their way out, anecdotally, I feel like almost always they get their way.
And Booker was a guy. I mean, I know the smoke was like KD to Houston. Booker was a guy I loved for Houston in theory,
Yeah.
because it's like, well, you got to move off of Fred VanVleet. You just send Jalen Green back to Phoenix and some other stuff, obviously, because they have stuff, obviously. And then it's like he kind of solves your point guard / shooting guard issue all in one because he's just that good.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's a
Yeah.
tough spot for Phoenix.
Well, it says a lot that that's what we're talking about. There's 2 weeks left in the regular season, and we're talking about what the Suns are going to do this offseason. Look, even if they do find their way into the play-in, which is still very possible. Sacramento's a dog tonight against Indy. They could lose that game, and it's back to 1. But I'm just starting to lose faith that Phoenix could really do anything. I mean, right now the Timberwolves and the Clippers are your 7 and 8, and I think both of those teams are significantly better than the Suns. I think they would welcome that matchup if it's a win and in, especially the Clippers. By the way, almost beat the Cavs without Kawhi Leonard yesterday. Let's hit a couple questions from the chat here. The Intrepid Cephalopod says, "Hey guys, made it to the finals, carried by this pod." All right, thank you very much. We appreciate you listening along all year. You said he did this in spite of trading SGA for Cat and Fred VanVleet mid-season. Thanks for all the advice this season. And then he says, Fred VanVleet or Malik Monk this week.
Let's see. How many games is Sacramento? Sacramento has 4 games, and Houston has 4 games. Yeah,
Yep, both have 4.
I think I would go with Monk. I know he saw like limited minutes the last 2 games coming off an injury, but VanVleet, man, it's so up and down. It's really annoying because totally possible VanVleet has a better week than Monk, but the floor is so low that I have a hard time trusting it.
I also like the matchups better for Sacramento. Tonight you get the Pacers, who are down Miles Turner, by the way. He was scratched with an illness. You get Washington on Wednesday. You get Charlotte on Friday. Those are teams we want to target. And even the Cavs on Sunday, they could play high scoring games. So I like that better. And look, I have VanVleet in the stake league, so I am very familiar with what's been going on there. Like what he did last night against Phoenix, I will now qualify as like a good output. Like I was okay with 13 points on 9 shots, 7 assists, and 2 steals. Like that's great compared to what he gave you the previous game. Should have been just a cake matchup against Utah. Played 34 minutes, 1 of 10 from the field, 1 of 7 from 3. Like those games are way too frequent for Fred VanVleet. I texted you in a fit of rage the other night. I'm like, he is the worst good player in the NBA. Like, how many other guys could get away with this? Like, I don't understand. Like, this guy's won a title. Like, he's been a borderline all-star for much of his career. Since coming back from injuries, played 11 games in the month of March, 13.5 points on 36% shooting.
He just cannot make a shot inside the 3-point line anymore. No. It was already like that, but when you watch him out there, I mean, he was already scraping by, given his height and his build. Which is just like a fullback.
Yep.
So it's like that can only last for so long before the only thing you can make is 3-pointers.
Yeah. And every time, I'm just like, I'm done. I'm not even putting him in the lineup this week. Then there's the 37.9 3-pointer game against Miami of all teams. It's like that was like his worst matchup of the last 2 weeks, and he gives you 37 in that one. So yeah, I think there's more upside with Monk. Both have 4 games, better matchups for Sacramento. Aaron says he got 2 questions. 1, how to handle streaming this week. He said his team is heavy on Monday, Wednesday, Friday games. 2, who do I drop for a waiver on Kyle Kuzma? Do you drop Davion Mitchell or Tari Eason to add Kyle Kuzma?
Yeah, Eason, when Houston's been healthy, Eason hasn't played as much, but he's been all right lately. I think we kind of know what we're getting with Davion Mitchell. It's just like mostly assists, and sometimes he'll get hot from the field and score points. I kind of like the upside of Eason.
Yeah.
So I would maybe drop Davion Mitchell. In terms of how to handle the streaming this week, I mean, most days, like there's really no super low volume day. Today there's 8 games, 7 on Tuesday, 9 on Wednesday, 6 on Thursday. So I guess in theory, you try to drop somebody who plays Wednesday or Friday and pick up someone who plays Thursday or Saturday.
Yep, I think that's right. And I'm with you on Tari Eason here. I have been rostering Mitchell in a couple leagues the last few weeks, and he's been totally fine. But it's like your median outcome is like 9 points, 4 assists. Maybe he gives you a steal, give you a couple threes. Like it's been totally fine in a deeper league, but I think especially if you're trying to make something happen here, if you're in your fantasy finals, you're looking for upside. I think there is more with Eason, and I will point out too that he's missed a few games here and there. Hasn't been playing back-to-backs, and they have no back-to-backs this week. So in theory, Tari Eason should be out there for all 4 of those games. All right, we'll hit some more questions on the other side, but real quickly, we have a message from our friends at Rebet. March Madness is here, coming up on the Final Four. If you're looking for a way to get in the game, it's time to check out Rebet, the ultimate social sportsbook and casino platform. With over 100 leagues on the sportsbook and 24/7 live dealer casino games, Rebet is striving to give users an experience they have not had elsewhere. All March long, Rebet is rolling out daily promos, making it the ultimate month of exciting offers for fans. And right now, for a limited time, Rebet is matching your first purchase up to $100 in Rebet cash when you use the promo code ROTOWIRE. You can download Rebet right now on the App Store or the Google Play Store. Just enter that code ROTOWIRE, ROTOWIRE, and start playing with those promo funds. It's time to play, predict, and experience the madness only on Rebet. All right, Mr. Firenuts coming through here. We got a nice photo of a sleeping cat. You can see that on the screen if you're watching along on YouTube. It says, last time this year, as always, great year from you fellas. Thank you, Mr. Firenuts. This will be the last pod, by the way, from Alex and I on Mondays. We'll keep this going through the end of the regular season, but given how the schedule works, we'll just have one more Monday episode. We'll mix in, a few episodes here and there in the playoffs, but Alex taking a much deserved vacation down to Florida next week. So I will be back with a TBD guest host, but this will be the final episode for Alex and I this year. Anyway, the question is Toronto going to continue with the on-off with their best players, even though they can't really move up or down in the tanking standings? That is essentially true. There's a a very outside chance they could get to like the 6th worst record. There's an outside chance they could, if they continue to win games, I guess be passed up by San Antonio. Toronto's won 4 in a row. The Spurs have lost 4 in a row. The Raptors continue to accidentally win. I think against all, like they're just out hustling the bad teams. Like they don't want to win. They're doing what they can. They're limiting guys like Scotty Barnes. They're sitting out Barrett and quickly, and they're still winning. It's a good question. I mean, I think the guys who have been affected will continue to be affected. Yeah, I guess maybe they could pull back, but it's like when we're talking about game 79, is it now like, all right, RJ Barrett, we're unleashing you? I feel extremely lucky that somehow Scotty Barnes has dodged all of this. I would not be in the top half of the stake league if that was not the case. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is here. Like, why are they not resting Scotty Barnes, but they are aggressively resting Pirtle, Barrett, and quickly?
I don't know. It could be an NBA thing, like an
Yeah.
organization, Adam Silver thing. But yeah, I don't think they'll just start playing these guys 36 minutes like Nick alluded to. I think they'll keep doing what they've been doing. Maybe, and I mean maybe, I could see them last game of the regular season or their last home game playing their guys.
It's like an apology to the fans.
Apology, sort of like an apology tour for the fans.
Yeah.
But I would not bank on something like that.
Yeah, they do only have one back-to-back remaining. If you want to try to read into that, that would be next Thursday and Friday. So, in theory, the schedule is relatively friendly, but they also play a lot of other bad teams down the stretch. So, like, until this is officially locked in, because again, they have been winning way too many games lately, I wouldn't be too optimistic. Like, they still play Brooklyn, they still play Charlotte. They finish out with Brooklyn, Charlotte, Dallas, San Antonio. Like that, those are all unfortunately winnable games for the Toronto Raptors. So part of it depends on how they do in the next week, and part of it depends on the other teams around them. All right, so part 2 of this question, weekly lock league, thinking about Jamal Shead for finals week. He seems to play in every game. So basically, do we trust Jamal Shead if we're looking at Raptors here? And yeah, Shead has not missed any games since February 2nd.
I'm fine trusting that. I mean, he puts up solid numbers, really good defender. Yep. I don't see any reason that would suddenly change.
Yeah. Last 15 games for him, he started 6 of those. Minutes have kind of been all over the place, but on average, 24 minutes per game, 10 points, 5 assists, 2.5 rebounds, 1.3 steals, 1.3 threes. I think in a deeper league, yeah, that's fine. I mean, I would probably rather have that over just crossing my fingers that quickly plays every other game. Would rather just lock that in. Matt Carmody says, thanks for all the shows, guys. Appreciate you tuning in, Matt. He says, would you go Aaron Gordon, Zachary Risacher, or Harrison Barnes in a Yahoo points league?
Yeah, I think I would go Aaron Gordon. I mean, the past 2 games for him have not been great, but one of those was like a massive win over Utah. 129-93. So he saw limited minutes. Then the other game against Milwaukee, he came back from injury, so sort of reduced minutes. But I think Gordon, just like, do you trust this guy to play 30 plus minutes? And can he put up quality numbers? I would trust him over Risacher and Harrison Barnes at this point. Even though Risacher has been playing really well, hot shooting mostly.
Yeah,
but I think I would still prefer Gordon.
Yeah, I would rank them in that order. I think there's a case for Risacher. Barnes to me is in maybe a slightly different category. There's just not a whole lot of upside there. You're not going to get the splash type of games that Risacher and Gordon are capable of. All 3 of those teams play 4 games, as you're probably aware already, Matt. But don't love the Spurs schedule here either. They play Orlando tomorrow, at Denver on Wednesday on a back-to-back, home against Cleveland on Friday, and then at Portland. It's like none of those are overly juicy. So yeah, Gordon 1, Risacher close 2. All right, Alex, let's talk a little bit about next season already as we start to look ahead a little bit. We'll of course have plenty of content coming your way throughout the offseason. We'll have rankings, we'll have draft coverage and all that. But players we are excited to draft or players we will not be drafting next year. I will tell you right away, I'm not taking Fred VanVleet. I don't know where the ADP is going to come in. I'm not living through this again. Maybe we'll start there because we talked last week a little bit about some of the biggest risers, and there will be some overlap there. But who are the guys you're either, whether it's because of injury, Joel Embiid, obvious, or performance decline, team context, or just guys like I'm dealing with here with VanVleet, where maybe you had him this year and you're like, I don't want to go through this again.
I think, yeah, if we're putting injuries kind of aside, I don't want to say I'm like out on this guy, But Donovan Mitchell was kind of like being drafted back end of the first round, start of the second, because he had a really, really good year last year. And I just think the way how good this Cavs team is, it's more about Evan Mobley now. I just I don't really view Donovan Mitchell as like someone you should be drafting in the first round. The problem is like I think it's going to end up being. We talked a lot about this. I think this year, maybe even last year, how the back end of the first round it's just landmines.
Yeah.
The entire back end of the first round. LaMelo, KD, Embiid, Giannis, you have to kind of plan for if you're in a category league. Curry's old, all these other guys, and I think
Yeah.
more. You may just end up drafting a guy like Donovan Mitchell because you feel like you're out of options. But I think there will be something to be said about just taking a risk on a guy with a ton of upside late.
Yeah. Yeah. I do wonder if like has Cade Cunningham just kind of taken his spot
Oh yeah,
in the first
yeah.
round, right? It's like I think he's kind of the guy that's going to go in that zone now. Harden, I think it's going to be really interesting because
Good
obviously
point.
he's at a much different point in his career than someone like Cade or even Donovan Mitchell. But total value on the season, he's played in almost every game. I mean, he's third right now in 8-cat. Still, there's a big drop off from SGA and Jokic down to the third best fantasy player, but that guy is pretty solidly James Harden. And I know you and I were in on him. Certainly wasn't saying you should take him third overall, but we were more than happy to pay the price on Harden this year, even when I thought the Clippers were going to be a worse team. But will there be people now overdrafting James Harden next year? Could he continue to do this into his mid-30s?
Yeah, see, this is the problem. He gets he gets lumped into these guys where it's like I know he can be the fifth best fantasy player, like for
Yeah.
stretches for like a month. He could be the fifth best player in fantasy, but then every year is more likely he's going to get hurt. It's tough, man.
He'll be 36 before the season starts. I mean, he's been among superstars. Like he's been near the top in terms of health. Like he's not an 82 game guy, but he's pretty consistently 70 plus throughout most of his career, despite the heavy usage. So yeah, it's like if I have to burn the 7th overall pick on him, I'm not sure I'm doing it. But if he's there late round 1, early round 2, I think I would think about that. Lauri Markkanen to me is another obvious.
Oh yeah,
not drafting him. I think he was already on that list for a lot of people this past year, but I think Lauri Markkanen and LaMelo Ball are like the two guys who I don't know where their ADPs settle. Markkanen will obviously go much later, but I think this is now 2 or 3 years in a row for both of those guys where if you've been the LaMelo Ball guy in your league, like you are not taking that plunge again next year. Same for Markkanen.
Yeah, I got LaMelo in a few spots.
Yeah.
I
Per
also
game, he
drafted
was great.
Yeah, I mean, the way most of my drafts ended up, I ended up being more of a Trae Young guy, which ended up being fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, LaMelo's brutal. Markkanen, I think Markkanen is going to slip to like what would you say, like 50 in some leagues? Assuming he doesn't get traded, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they
Even if
signed
he
him to the
does,
extension. I'm trying to look at where his ADP was this year because I mean, I
I think
remember
in the
getting some pretty
30s.
good deals. Yeah, let's see. Average was 51. He was going like Yahoo leagues, he was going in the 30s. Best
Okay,
balls, he was going in the 30s. This is dragged down. Like in ESPN leagues, he was going like 85. That seems a little odd. I think he'd be closer to that though, right? Like, would you take him in the top 75?
I might take him in the top 75.
Okay.
I think after pick 50, you have
Fair
to
enough.
just start thinking about it because you are in theory going for upside plays anyway. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, who else in this range, is
Yeah.
giving me the kind of upside but I'd be way more comfortable if he got traded. Like his numbers would go down, but like at
Right.
least the guy would play in theory, right?
Yeah. Well, part of it depends on what they do this offseason, specifically with the draft. Like if they win the lottery and get Cooper Flagg,
Yeah.
all right, maybe all of a sudden you're actually trying to contend. It's like you can't. How many years in a row can you realistically pull this? I mean, it would be like 4 years in a row. Like at some point you got to try to win games. Like I don't know. I don't know. But the other thing with Markkanen is even on a per game basis, he's outside the top 100. Like he's just not been. He's not been that good. He gives you really nothing outside of points and threes, and his minutes were limited to the point where the rebounds weren't even all that good. I don't know. I'm not really interested in signing up for that. Christian in the chat, by the way, says he is not drafting John Collins anymore.
I mean, dude, anybody on this Jazz
Yeah,
team
really.
that's a veteran. I mean, the Collins thing is especially frustrating because at like 3 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks at a time, he'll be putting up these numbers where you're like,
Yeah.
like per 36 this season, he's averaging 22 and 10.
Yep.
with 2 assists and like blocks, steals, everything. Like per game, he's excellent. It just
he's too
you
good.
just can't trust him.
He's too good for the Jazz. Yeah. John Morant. Are we doing that again?
I haven't really been a Morant guy. I don't know if I've drafted Morant in a competitive league. I mean, maybe once. No, I mean, you can't. We've been talking about this with Morant all the time. It's just the injuries keep piling up. His style of play. He's always hurt. He's dislocating his hip and he's breaking his elbow and all this other stuff. Right? It's kind of ridiculous. And he's a way better points league player. So like if you're in a points league, it's like, yeah, he's gonna put up 40 fantasy points a game, but you still probably can't draft him that high because you're worried about it.
Yeah. I don't think it's quite as severe for this team as it is Utah, but I feel like I've just had terrible luck every time I draft anybody from the Blazers. Unfortunately, I didn't get a lot of Abdia this year, but it's like like Simons is always somebody that's kind of exciting, and you end up disappointed. And Shaden Sharp's minutes are all over the place. I think DeAndre Ayton's season went like exactly as we expected.
Yes, the Ayton season definitely went as expected. Yeah, this is the thing that's like. I was, I got Ayton in a couple spots, but I think those were auction leagues. So it's like, well, I was just willing to like, his name has been dragged through the mud so much as he can give him so cheap. It's like, well, if I can get 40, 50 games out of him, we'll be fine. And then I'll drop him when I have to. But the Blazers have been really tough to, like, I don't know how high does Scoot Henderson get drafted next year? Like, I have no idea because there was a stretch where he was playing really well and everyone was talking about, oh, Scoot's playing well, Scoot's back. And then it's like, well, is he? Because now he's having another stretch of like 12 games where he kind of sucks.
Well, the big turning point game was March 12th against the Knicks, right? He has that huge game, 30 points, 10 of 16 from the field, 6 of 10 from 3. And he'd been playing well before that too. That was part of like a month-long stretch. He's played 7 games since then. He's averaging 10 points on 31% shooting. Like I'm not a Scoot guy. I'm really not. I want him to be good. I want the Blazers are a really fun franchise, and I feel like the NBA is better when they are good. But I don't know. I mean, is he going to go in the top 125?
People will take him top 100. Just
So?
because I think this year is going to be kind of, I don't know if I want to say like it's going to be a big turning point, but like the amount of tanking and the amount of just like random star play, I think people are going to start taking shots way earlier than before. And I'm going to do the same. I think in like the draft guide or whatever I write, like broadly speaking draft guide, it's like once the 7th or 8th round comes, you can just start firing at whoever you like. Whoever you think is in a good position to succeed.
Got a question in the chat. For tanking teams, is it safe to say you only draft the number 1 player on that team, avoid everyone else? It's so case by case, I think. It's like if you did that with Charlotte, you still got burned because LaMelo missed so much time. I mean, you could argue that John Collins was the best fantasy player for parts of the season for Utah. That didn't work out. It's like Kessler's been in and out. It almost feels like nobody is all that safe to me. I mean, are we to the point where like, is there anybody on the Wizards that you will draft next year? Is there anyone on the Hornets? It's like, I think part of the argument is, well, they got to be a little bit better. It can't go as bad as it did last year. But for some of these teams, it really has been 2 or 3 years in a row where if you invested in any of these guys, you took a loss.
Well, first I'll say something about the Nets because it's like everyone was like, well, Cam Thomas.
Right.
Well, he didn't play that well and he got hurt. And you can't necessarily control being hurt. But the problem is if you are the best player on a tanking team, most other teams, when they play you, they're like, we got to stop one guy and then we win the game. Like if we just stop Cam Thomas from having an efficient night, the Brooklyn Nets are going to lose.
Yep.
So then it's like those guys I think never perform as well as you want them to, which is what happened to Jordan Poole last year. Now Poole's playing better this year. So if you're asking, is there anybody on the Wizards I would draft? I would draft Poole probably. That's a different case because like Sarr is I think going to be fine. But you mentioned the Hornets?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you jump back in on Brandon Miller because if you assume LaMelo's going to miss time, then it's going to be Miller's team and Miller plays way better when LaMelo's out. But even that kind of feels like a risk.
All right, let's talk about just a handful of more positive stories, guys. We're excited to draft next year. We'll try to avoid too much overlap from last week's episode when we talked about biggest year over year risers. You can go back and check that out wherever you get your pods or on the RotoWire Fantasy Basketball YouTube channel. Dyson Daniels is an obvious one who comes to mind. Although the price is going to be interesting because right now in 8-cat leagues he's a first round value. Number 12 overall. I don't think he's going to go that high, but he's going to be one of those guys that I think if you're in a category league, somebody's going to be willing to overpay because they just want to lock in those steals. Onyeka Okongwu, sticking with Atlanta. I'm excited. I've been drafting him every year for years, and he's just been averaging like 18 minutes a night. This was finally the year, partially due to injury and partially just due to performance that he has overtaken Clint Capella. And you look at the last month, we're talking like 15 games, top 25 player. On a per game basis.
Yeah, I mean he's definitely a better category league player because he's a center that hits his free throws.
Yep.
I am not necessarily convinced he's ever going to really be a 3-point shooter. I felt the same way about Evan Mobley, and he's been better. So we'll see how they handle that. But he's also really undersized. So I feel like something kind of has to give in Okongwu's development for him to take an actual leap. Because I also think it's kind of telling like that he wasn't playing huge minutes until now.
Yep.
But I think Okongwu will probably go. My guess would be somewhere between like 50 and 75.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fine. I'm pretty okay taking him in that range. I mean, Capella's on an expiring deal. Highly doubt he's back next year. So I think, a healthy Hawks core of Trae Young, Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, and Onyeka Okongwu. Like it's not the 1 seed, but I'm excited about that.
Jalen Johnson was putting up a extremely good season.
Yep.
I had some takes ready about Jalen Johnson that may have been a little too hot for the podcast, but he's very, very good.
OG Anunoby is an interesting one for me. This was one of my biggest misses of the year. I was off OG. I thought he would just be. I thought what would happen to Mikal Bridges would happen to him. It would just be a lot of nights where you're just kind of waiting for Jalen Brunson to throw you the ball in the corner. You take 3 or 4 threes, you play defense, and that's about it. Anunoby has been incredible, especially since Brunson went down. But really, this extends for most of the year. It really felt like to me he was kind of even, if not even ahead of Mikal Bridges sometimes in the offensive pecking order. And the Knicks have so many guys, but for the most part, pretty much all of them have worked out, right? I mean, Bridges has been a little disappointing, but before the injury, Brunson was Brunson. Cat gave you a great year. Josh Hart gave you a great year. I think I kind of read a little bit too much into Anunoby's fit within that starting 5 and was totally wrong. I mean, he's been essentially borderline first round value over the last month without Brunson, and somebody I will probably be back in on next year.
The steals and blocks are huge.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing about guys on the Knicks too. It's like, yeah, Mikal Bridges is having a down year. The thing is, imagine if Bridges was playing for a normal coach and he was playing 33 minutes a game and he was scoring 15 and a half points. Right. People would be like, what? Does this guy suck? Yeah. But yeah, Anunoby, I think the problem with Anunoby is that I think part of the reason his ADP was so low is that he had always been hurt. And he really hasn't been hurt this year. So I'm more like, I'm worried his price might get a little too high next year.
Yeah. I'll throw Jaden McDaniels on the list as well. He's had a couple bad games lately, but I thought he took a huge jump up in terms of consistency this year. Like he's not, he's not putting up 40-point games or anything like that, but just, last year there were a lot of, all right, he played 38 minutes and took 2 shots and, scored 5 points. Like he's at least giving you like 12 to 16 points on a lot of nights. He's still giving you defense. He's become a much better 3-point shooter. And I think that's gone a little bit undercovered. Like, I don't think he's someone whose ADP is going to like skyrocket next year. So I think you'll still get a pretty good value on him. Good question here. I did want to address this, by the way, from Hooks and Hoops. He says, how high are we drafting Cooper Flagg next season? To start this discussion, Alex, I will ask you, does it matter where he lands when you look at the realistic potential teams that could be drafting number 1?
Doesn't matter where he lands. I'd be worried if he landed in Charlotte.
Yeah.
Or like New Orleans.
Yep.
That it's like they already have a lot of high usage guys there. And I think from like, I'm not, you have way more like, you've been watching a lot more Cooper Flagg than me, and I probably have a stronger opinion on him. It sounds like everybody thinks he's the type of guy who could just seamlessly if he needs to be a number one, he can. If he has to be a number three, like he's a good enough, he can like play a role if he needs
Yeah.
to. He can cut, he can dribble, he can pass, he can shoot, he can play defense. So I think the upside of Cooper Flagg, no matter where he goes, is that maybe he's just really efficient and
Yeah.
that like they don't need him to score, so he'll just like be really strong on defense.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that makes Cooper Flagg unique is there is not an obvious NBA comparison. I think with most guys, you could say, all right, he reminds me of this guy. He's a little bit of this. Like with Flagg, it's like you got to put like 5 different players together to come up with a reasonable comp. It's like I've seen people throw out Kevin Garnett, and it's like, yeah, I could see a little part of that, but not really. The one that I've heard more often lately is Kawhi Leonard, which I actually don't mind. You know, it'd be tough for me to imagine him reaching that like a full Kawhi ceiling, but
Yeah.
you know, obviously Flagg at this stage in his development is like worlds ahead of where Kawhi was at the same age.
I've heard some Scottie Pippen.
Yeah, that's a
Like
good one.
maybe he's not your number one, but if you slot him in as a number two and he just does everything else
Yep.
and runs a bench unit and plays good defense. So
Yeah.
I don't like how high are we drafting him in fantasy? I mean, I felt like I was actually maybe more aggressive. Like when we talked about Wembanyama, I
Yeah.
felt like I was ahead of a lot of other people where I'm like, I don't care that he's a rookie and rookies are bad. If he averages like Walker Kessler ranked like 30th because he blocked 3 shots a game. Like imagine what
Yeah.
Wembanyama's going to do when he also scores. So I don't know. How do you feel about Flagg as a potential fantasy player?
So I'm looking at Wembanyama's ADP from 2 years ago. Composite ADP was about 19th overall. That's about where he was going in ESPN, CBS, a little later in Yahoo, a little earlier in Underdog. I would not take Flagg that high. I don't
Sure.
think there's that kind of rookie or upside here, but his stat profile should play well for fantasy. You know, even if he does end up in Washington and they're a terrible team, I mean, he's well over a steal per game, well over a block per game, good field goal percentage. His 3-point shooting is up to 37% on the year. He's a mid 80s free throw shooter. I mean, I think the floor is really high. You know, he's definitely a top 100 guy, obviously, but would I take him inside the top like 40 even? I'm not sure I would. That's where landing spot will come in because you're right. It's like he's also the type of guy that I feel like I'd rather see him go to a good organization than just go try to be the man in Washington. Like I think given the player comps that we just threw out there, you know, it's like these are guys that in part succeeded because of where they were drafted. And, you know, Scottie Pippen, is he the same player if he doesn't, you know, spend basically his entire career in Chicago? Is Kawhi the same player if he doesn't develop with the Spurs? I don't know. So I would be very fearful of some of those destinations that you mentioned. You know, the ultimate wild card here would be the Sixers winning the lottery and obviously keeping their pick. It would be kind of a doomsday scenario for everybody who's rooted on the downfall of the Sixers. Like, I don't, it'd be fun. I guess it's like, they might need that in order to like reestablish themselves as a contender. Like Toronto would be both fun and frustrating for fantasy. Like, honestly, the spot I would really like to see him is Portland. I don't, you know, their chances will be minuscule, but we also just saw, you know, Atlanta jump up 9 spots last year.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Portland, you're like, okay. uh, Obviously, people have their opinions about Scoot. We just talked about him, but in theory, you're like, well, we have Scoot, Klingon, Cooper Flagg, Shea and Sharp. Maybe we make a move to trade Simons, or maybe we keep
Yeah.
him, see how good we are. But I was kind of wondering, like, as you were talking about like what his upside is, I wonder like what is the best case scenario for him, like a Blake Griffin rookie season? You know, because Blake came
Yeah.
out, and I'm looking at Blake's 8 cat as a rookie right now is 57 as a
Yeah.
rookie. He averaged basically 22 and 12. Now I don't think Cooper Flagg's averaging 12 rebounds from what
Right.
I understand about him,
No.
but
No, I mean,
um,
stat profile wise, it's not that crazy. I mean, he's not going to average 12 boards, certainly not. And obviously,
right.
Blake missed his true rookie year. You know, he didn't debut until he was like basically 22. So Flagg will be, you know, barely 19 for most of next season. So I think there could be a little bit more of a learning curve there. That's not, I mean, it's not a bad comp. Obviously, very different body types. You know, Griffin, you know, more of a kind of an impressive leaper, but obviously Flagg is a great athlete in his own right. You know what? Maybe what he loses in rebounds, he makes up for in the defensive stats. You know, Blake was never a block per game guy, not really ever close. I think Flagg could push for 1 steal a game, 1 block per game. He's excellent in like chase down scenarios. Like
Sure.
he's not necessarily like a great pure rim protector because he just doesn't have that much size, but coming over as the help defender, the timing on that is incredible. Showed off some passing. I don't know if you watched the Arizona game last week. Like there 3 consecutive possessions, you know, just kind of beat the press by himself and threw up an alley oop to Malawatch. So like there is some more playmaking there, I think, than we've seen. And I also do think he's the type of player that will will find more success with NBA spacing too.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
he's got such good size. He can elevate. He can work in the pick and roll. It really it depends. Like this is but one of the other big questions with him is he ready to be a Jason Tatum type of ball handler? Like that would be another, like, body style wise, that would be another comp. You know, Tatum to me, tighter handle, smoother, you know, better pull up shooter. But you know, is a team going to use him like that right away, or is there a team that says, we kind of think you're more of a 4. We want you to, you know, almost develop more as like a more offensive Chet Holmgren, I guess. You know, less defensive presence, but you know, like you don't necessarily picture Chet Holmgren initiating the offense for OKC. You know,
I mean, we just kind of just talked about this guy, but is Jalen Johnson kind of a crazy comp, or is that fine?
no, I
I
actually
mean, I think
that's
he'll be
pretty good.
better. He'll be better as a rookie than Jalen Johnson, but like current Jalen
Yeah,
Johnson, like if you take the past 2 years, he's averaging 17, 9, and 4 with 1.4
yeah,
steals, 0.9 blocks. Maybe he's not as efficient, but
that's pretty good. I mean, I think Johnson's a little more physical, but other than that, I think if you look at like the stat profile, I think that's a really good one. Yeah, it's like if could Cooper Flagg give you close to what Jalen Johnson gave you 2 years ago, or last year, I should say, you know, which would be like
yeah.
16 points, 8 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 2 combined steals, blocks. Like that seems realistic.
And that resulted in basically a 50th ranked season for Jalen
Yeah.
Johnson. So I think what we're kind of coming down on is I'm sure someone will draft him 50th.
Oh yeah.
Should he be drafted higher than that? You're probably taking a lot of
Yeah.
risk doing that.
Yeah. Most rookies in general, when you draft them that high, it's like, it's a lot like Marvin Harrison for anybody watching who played fantasy football, where it's like, okay, you could take Marvin Harrison with the final pick in the first round. You could take him 12th overall in order just to get a return on investment, to meet value, not exceed value. Like you now need him to have like one of the greatest rookie seasons ever. Like that is now your baseline, you know? So like, I just don't like being in that boat where it's like, even if things do go right, you're like, okay, I met value because I drafted him a little too high. But yeah, we'll see. It depends on the landing spot. You know, maybe he'll boost his stock even more at the Final Four this weekend. But I mean, he's the most popular college basketball player since Zion. I don't think that's even debatable. So like, much like when Zion came in, there will be people that are like, oh, I know Cooper Flagg because I've watched Duke a few times. I want this guy on my team. Whereas you didn't have anybody really like that in this past draft class. All right, we'll wrap it up there. Good questions as always, guys. Best of luck to anybody whose leagues are still going on. Looking forward to issuing an official update on the RotoWire Stake League, which does end later tonight. Like we said earlier, this will be the final episode for every Monday with Alex and I. I'll be back next week closing things out. We'll be taking all of our shows through the final day of the regular season. We'll mix in a few playoff episodes here and there, some offseason episodes, but really enjoyed doing this with you every Monday, Alex. I know you feel the same. And will you be on the Friday episode this week?
Friday's done. No more Friday podcasts.
That's it?
So that's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, there we have it. But yeah, I'll be back with Brandon Kravitz later this week. We'll still have Kieran and Mike taking us through this week and next week. So again, best of luck to everybody still alive. Go bring it home.